Hi everybody, and welcome to the 24 hours of PASS, and thank you for being part of our community which we all grow together. We're very excited that you can join us today to a session about Introduction to Power BI Designer by Steve Wake. As you probably know, this event consists of a full day of back-to-back sessions presented by both young upcoming speakers and seasoned experts from all over the world. And the good news is that all these sessions, even if you can't watch all of them, they will be available within the week, so you can watch them offline. My name is Ami Levin. I'm a SQL Server MVP for now 10 years. I live in California, USA. And before I let Steve start talking, he'll have about 45 minutes, so you will have some time for questions at the end as well. We're just going to go through a couple of slides to help make this webinar a little bit better. So if you have technical difficulties, either with video or with sound or whatever, please type your question. There is a chat bar, which you can see on your screen on the GoToWebinar panel. We are unable to hear you, so don't try talking out loud or shouting. To maximize your screen, there's a zoom button located at the top of the presentation window. And if you have any questions for the speaker as well, also use the chat. We'll make sure that the speaker gets your question and has the time to answer them. Also, at the end of the session, there will be a short evaluation, and we really appreciate you taking a moment to help us fill it up so we can make this event even better going forward. A couple of words about our sponsors, which this event would not have been possible without. So thank you Microsoft, SQL Sentry, Cisco, HP, Dell, and SolarWinds for your support of this event. If you don't yet know, PASS Summit is coming very, very soon, much sooner than you think. And if you have not yet attended PASS Summit, I highly recommend that you start now. The regular price until July 12th for the entire summit is $17.95. But if you are a member of either a local or virtual chapter, please contact your virtual or local chapter for a discount code that can take $150 off the price. And remember, the price will go up after July 12th, so hurry. And so, without further ado, let me introduce Steve Wake, MCSE and MCITP. He's a senior consultant of business intelligence at RevGen Partners, president of the Denver SQL Server User Group, and a lead organizer for SQL Saturday in Denver. Steve, the stage is all yours.
Great. Thanks, Ami. All right, so getting on with the presentation here, I'll try to get through as much of this as I can, but just kind of a warning that this is an intro level, so I know there'll probably be lots of questions about can I do this, can I do that, and how that stuff works, but we'll see how much we can drill into on it with the time, but I do have a few introductory slides, and then we'll dig in a little bit more into doing a demo actually with Power BI, both with the designer and seeing how that interacts with the new Power BI website as well. So for those who really aren't completely familiar with Power BI, it is kind of a new product line for Microsoft within their business intelligence space. It's something that to a certain extent has been building over time, which I'll get into in my next slide with just a quick history of what's happened. But the idea behind it and the reason why they created kind of a new product line within business intelligence is they felt the need to have something that was a little bit better aimed at business power users or end users to be able to build their own reporting solutions, dashboards, anything that's like, any reporting type scenarios that they might need, but with a little bit of IT management built into it as well. For those of you who've maybe done, Microsoft BI in the past, there's always been reporting services, of course, out there, but that's purely a IT managed setup, so the end users really can't go in and create reports, and you wouldn't want them to because it's such a detailed environment using Visual Studio. And then they also tried, if you remember, with Report Builder as well, some of that stuff too. So they're kind of just going down a path where IT is just kind of there to watch things, maybe do some initial setup of some of the data that people would use, and then let the end users build all the reports themselves. And the other big thing is to help minimize the clicks that it takes to actually build these reports. As you'll see when we go through the demo, it's actually their whole mantra for the Power BI product is 3 clicks to awesome. Is kind of one of the things they've said. So that is kind of what they live by when it comes to that. So just something to keep in mind as well as we're going through this, and why some things have been simplified the way they have been. So kind of a quick history on Power BI. Kind of the first product that was part of this was back quite a while ago, actually, when they released Power Pivot, was an Excel add-on that they built back in the days of, I think it goes back to 2008 R2 basically, in that kind of time frame is when you can think of this. But it was using what used to be called the Vertipack engine, which is now called XVelocity, which is the columnar compression engine that exists today in the tabular model. It's also now being used in the database engine itself to actually run all of the, if you do any of the columnar indexes now that you can do, those are actually all built off this same technology. So that's something that started way back when with the original Power Pivot. Then kind of the next step, as I kind of mentioned, was the tabular model that came into existence with SQL Server 2012, where you could actually take these models that you have built in the background within Power Pivot and actually deploy them out to an SSAS server. So it takes it from being kind of a end user managed model then to being something that IT could manage and keep track of as they got too big to run on an individual's PC, because the big thing, if you don't know, with tabular and the XVelocity setup is that it's all in memory. So it's something to keep in mind when it comes to that, is that you have to be able to load everything into memory for that to work properly. Then the next big thing that kind of came along that helped with some of this stuff was brought the same time when Tabular came out with SSAS, is the Microsoft BI semantic model, or BISM as it's shortened by some people, was the thing that kind of helped unify the multidimensional models that existed within analysis services in Tabular, and then how the reporting services stuff worked with the different RDL files for reporting services were all kind of unified under this semantic model to help make it a little bit easier to work with, mainly for IT, of course, and easier to understand. Then we got Power View, again, another add-on for Excel at the time. It was the reporting piece that basically was built on top of what you were already building with Power Pivot. And then the biggest thing that changed is kind of the rebranding to Power BI, and the big thing that a lot of people may have missed is that they did add a space. So initially, as you see in the slide there, the first versions of Power Pivot and Power View, there was no space. They were just, 2 words slammed together. Now with the Power BI, when that came out, for whatever reason, they decided they wanted to put the space between them. So if you see people that are still talking about the current versions of Power Pivot, Power View, Power Query, Power Map, they're supposed to have the space in between. Now even Microsoft breaks this rule, because if you go and launch the Power Pivot Excel add-in, even the latest version still has the menu at the top in Excel, still shows Power Pivot without the space. So hopefully when the Excel 2016 comes out, they'll hopefully have fixed that by then. But yeah, there is supposed to be the space between them now. That's kind of how they've built all of the marketing around it now. So then the next big thing after they launched this new Power BI is they did add a bunch of SharePoint and Office 365 integration, and it required those components actually to make some of these new things actually work, like the Q&A feature that was added actually required you to have SharePoint or an Office 365 online account set up to actually even be able to use it. So that's where things got a little bit hard for a lot of places to handle doing this, because you either had to be a large enterprise and have SharePoint, or you had to be an Office 365. There was no middle ground for people who weren't going to use SharePoint and weren't going to use Office 365. So that's kind of where some of the confusion came in with using Power BI, and that's kind of what they're trying to address now. With what they're calling the Power BI preview that's been going on for a little over 6 months now, is kind of what I would call Power BI 2.0, because it is kind of a complete rethinking of the entire product, which is kind of what's driving us into this particular presentation. All right, so just a little warning that all the stuff coming from this point forward now is all, as I said, kind of the preview mode version. So we're moving into a realm of, where things could change at any minute as I'm going through it. It's hard to say sometimes. It does happen, but just be aware that some of this stuff is still all in preview mode. None of this stuff is actually released, but you are able to go out for free and actually sign up for it and start using it yourself. So I'll show you how to do that in a minute as well. So what is Power BI Designer? So the definition that Microsoft's actually got up on the powerbi.com website, I kind of put in here and just highlighted some of what I think are the key parts of the tool. Biggest thing being, of course, it's a dedicated report authoring tool. So this is a big switch with this Power BI Designer, that the idea is not to be using Visual Studio to build reports. They will be built within this Power BI Designer, is the idea for all the reports that you would build with this tool. And then the other big thing is rich data transformation, visual analytics, and a unified seamless experience. So what they're trying to do is make it so that it's easy to do data transformations. As you'll see, it's kind of built on what, if you've already used Power Query, Power Pivot, it's kind of all built on that stuff in the background, kind of all of it's being combined into this one tool, which is the Power BI Designer for your actual building environment. And then you've got the powerbi.com website, which becomes the place where all the reports can be deployed out to. And the other thing that's highlighted down there as well is that it empowers others to do timely, critical insights on any device anywhere. And that's the other critical difference with the new Power BI, is that it is being driven to be available on any device. So already today with the preview version of Power BI, you can get the iOS app to use on iPad and iPhone. The Android version is coming, they've said. I don't think it's out there yet. There's a Windows 8 application already available out there, what they used to call Metro or whatever they're going to be calling them now with new Windows 10 setup. But they've already got that app out there that you can actually download for free and use as well. And yeah, it's just the idea is going to be it's going to run on as many different devices as possible, which I think is a really good move in that way, is that it's designed from the ground up to work with all these devices, which is great. And just some more details, a little bit about what the Designer actually is. It is a standalone app. As I said, it's you download it as an application off the powerbi.com website. The other thing I'll mention about it, because people will always ask, it is 64-bit only. The assumption with going into Power BI 2.0 is that people are going to have to be using computers that are 64-bit set up to be able to use it. They will not create a 32-bit version of the application. At least that's what they've been saying since December, is that they just don't even want to address that particular situation, mainly because of the memory requirements to do these type of models correctly. The more memory, as I said, it's using some of that tabular technology, Power Pivot technology in the background. It needs as much memory as it can get to, so that's why it's a 64-bit application. And what you'll see when we get into the demo is that the preview version of the designer is integrating in Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, but it's not everything from all three of those tools. So don't think that you're getting the completely full feature set for all three of these. They are basically having to recode to make this stuff work, because the idea is like I said, it's going to work across all these different platforms, mobile and other operating systems even. So they've had to rework how some of the code was originally done for these particular add-ins when they lived inside of Excel. So we're not getting everything that's out there today in all these tools, but what we're starting to see now with the preview for Power BI actually revving new updates about every month. They're pretty much on a 30-day release cycle, which I expect here in the next week to see the next release of Power BI Designer out, probably here any day now. So with it moving that fast, they're actually adding new features in Designer that aren't in any of the existing add-ons as well. So while they're adding some of the features to close the gap, they're also adding new stuff that didn't exist in the other products as they are today, which is kind of interesting. And then we've got when you build, what you'll see is when we build these actual reports and queries and everything, it's all kind of loaded together into one file when you save it out to your file system, which is this new PBIX file extension is what it is. And it kind of follows the same model for those of you who have played with any of the Office documents that are out there today, where they've all got the X at the end that's just kind of indicating it's either XML or that it's a container. So what you can actually do is just add a .zip extension onto the end of these PBIX files and open it up as a zip file, and you'll actually see all the separate files underneath it. So it's just a container file that's compressing some of this stuff down to take up less space. But it looks as though it's one file on your system, and when in reality it's a whole bunch of separate files all rolled up into this one file. But that file is the other way around that I'll kind of get into, because the next question always comes up with this stuff is with PowerBI.com and deploying your stuff out there. Some people are like, oh, I really don't want to put stuff on the internet. Because it is a file that's saved locally, you can just distribute these PBIX files around to everybody, and then everybody who wants to use it would just need to have that free Power BI Designer loaded on their desktop to then be able to open those files and look. So the data that you can access within Power BI Designer currently is a growing list, so that's why there's all the and mores. But these just give you some idea of the type of things they're looking at. There's all the on-prem type data sources that you might think of that are available pretty much today in most of the Microsoft BI stack, that just will continue to grow as they add more support and other vendors come to them and want to add support to it. But it's a pretty complete list at this point for that setup. The online data sources really is Azure at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised with the way they've been growing out some of this stuff that they don't add Amazon in some form there, which you can connect to as a regular data source as well, just through setting it up as a regular connection as well. So it's not to say you can't connect to that. You can connect to pretty much anything that you have an HTTP address for as well. So it doesn't require them to build support for Amazon specifically. But then there's also all the big new thing they're doing with Power BI 2.0 is this SaaS stuff, the software as a service type connectors that are being built right in to it, which is something that we'll actually look at in my demo as well here in a minute. But just some of the idea of the things they're adding is Salesforce, they've got Google Analytics, GitHub, SAP, Zendesk, and there's a whole nother list that we'll get into here in a second when we actually look at it. So with that, I will actually switch over to actually showing what it looks like to run it. So first thing, when you're actually, to get all the stuff to set up to actually run you this stuff, is you can just go to powerbi.com, and this is the website that you'll get. They're kind of changing their color scheme, so it's kind of weird. They're using a yellow and black color scheme now, whereas before it was like green, white, and black, so I'm not quite sure why the color scheme changed. But I would expect to see Power BI Designer's color scheme change to match this with probably the next version. But you just go here, enter in a work address, work email address like it says. It has to be a work email address. It can't be like a google.com or gmail.com or anything like that. It actually has to be some kind of work domain account. You just click the button and it'll get you all set up for a preview website that we'll see in a second. That's where you deploy your reports and solutions out to, and then also the links to actually download the tools are out there as well, so you can just click on the downloads, go grab the latest version of the Power BI Designer from here, and then also get the applications that I mentioned for iOS and for Windows. And then there is another download that's out there in preview as well, which is the Power BI Analysis Services connector. So this is the way you can connect to your on-prem SSAS server to access your cubes. And that's, I would expect that to grow over time as well. This is just on and preview as well for analysis services at this point. I would expect there to be similar setups for some of the other on-prem sources as well. It's just a way so that it could pass the credentials through onto those particular on-prem sites so you can still use all the security that you've got built into your existing on-prem solutions. So that's that part. And then once you've downloaded and installed the Power BI Designer, you'll get this icon, just like I have here on my desktop. That's just the Power BI Designer. Like I said, right now it's green and white. I wouldn't be surprised if that turns to yellow and black in the next version. But once you launch that, it's a pretty quick launch. And then it actually just comes up with some real helpful kind of wizard type stuff right away to actually walk you through getting your first item set up. There's a whole bunch of videos here walking you through how you can set things up. Won't be able to spend a ton of time on how to get everything set up within Power BI. We'll just kind of walk through some of the stuff real quick, but it is very easy to use, as you'll see. I'll just click on that Get Data just so we can get an idea of the amount of sources available to us in this Power BI Designer. Might be a little difficult to see from this far, so I'll zoom in. But of course you got your Excel, your CSVs, your XMLs, and your text files. An interesting one is the folder that you can actually point it at a folder and it'll process all the files within a folder. If you want to do that type of a setup without having to do like an SSIS package to do that kind of stuff for you, you can actually just point it right at the files and it'll pull them in. Of course, you got SQL Server and Access. You got Analysis Services cubes, whether they're tabular or multidimensional. Both of those work. Oracle, IBM, all those ones I mentioned. And down here you've got your Azure SQL database. And then you've also even got the marketplace for Azure. So if you're getting some of the free or paid subscription data, that works in here as well. Next page, we've got HD Insight, we've got the blob storage, Azure table storage. I would expect in the next version this will also be updated to include Azure, the new, they just have it in preview that they announced previously. That's the actual data, you can do the data warehouse stuff in Azure now. They've already added it as a source in the online powerbi.com. They're actually revving that even faster than they're revving the actual designer application, so I'd expect to see that as a data source here coming up as well in the next version. Then we got web, which just means pointing at a web page, which we'll see in a second. That's actually what I'll demo. Then you got SharePoint, OData, Hadoop, Active Directory, Exchange, CRM, Facebook, which Facebook's kind of interesting if you want to go out and pull some of your data out of Facebook on your own and look at it. That's a cool one to play with. I got Google Analytics, which I'll also show as well, using my own website as kind of a setup for that. And then we got business objects, and then you got Salesforce, ODBC queries, and then further down we got ODBC tables, which is a new one that's in beta, and then just a blank query. So if you've got something you just want to write a query against, that's what you can use. So as I mentioned, I'm going to do a web demo here real quick. So we'll click Web, click Connect. Brings up a real simple thing, looking for a URL. That's not what I meant to do. What I'm going to do is I've got this page here where I was looking at the list of the highest grossing films on Wikipedia. So what you can do is anything that's like a regular HTML table, like this table here is within the wiki, can all be pulled in really easily into Power BI. So any of these tables that you see within this web page are all easily sucked right into Power BI. So I'm just going to grab the URL here and try to pull in that first table there into my setup. So we'll go paste. I'll wait for the view to kind of catch up here. It looks like it's taking a while for the screen to refresh, but it looks like we're good now. Click OK. So this goes out and parses that page. It's asking, that's a little bit different than what you use anonymous access, select which URL. That's fine. Click connect. Since this isn't a site that we have to worry about logging into, anonymous will work fine. Okay, and then what it's doing is now it's taking that page and it's actually parsing all of the stuff that it sees within that particular page. So if I click on this first item here, it will generate a preview. It takes a couple seconds to pull it in, but you can see it just looks like a regular SQL table where we're actually pulling in that highest grossing films area, and it's just showing all of the data as if it was in a table. And then it does the same for some of the others. If we look at the one that's adjusted for inflation, etc. So all those tables are all available, including some of the others that didn't have any specific headings, which, you know, these are all things that maybe are in footnotes, etc. So it is just trying to parse the website. It's not always going to be able to grab everything correctly off a page without having any context. So we'll just grab this first table, just click the check mark next to it. You can pull in multiple. This is, you know, basically, like we said, Power Query in the background, so it does allow you to pull in multiple items, even from different queries and stuff. If you want to pull stuff from different data sources and pull them all together, you can do that in here as well, just to save time and make this work. I'm just going to use just this one table as a source, this particular high grossing films one. And there's two buttons down here. So there's a load and an edit button. The load button just means I just want to take it straight as is. What I see in the preview, I just want to pull it all in as a source into my model that I'm actually going to build some reports off of. The edit is kind of the nice way. You can also do the edit through the query tab over here on the left side. But if you want to do it right away within your query, you can click the edit button, and that will launch into a more familiar interface for those of you who have done Power Query in the past. It just comes up like an Excel spreadsheet, basically, that looks like the data that we just saw with all the rows and columns. In this case, thankfully, all the columns come through real nice with the column headings. You know, some tables you may not get that. You can actually write, you know, any of the DAX that you're used to within Power Query to clean any of this up. You'll notice over here on the right, we've got the applied steps, which is the same setup that it is today in Power Query if you use that in Excel as well. And then you can come in here and do stuff like this references column, really don't need this, so I'm going to actually just remove that column. Just click right-click and remove. Same for peak, don't really need that. I'll remove those columns. So now we've, you know, pulled the data down and actually already modified it to fit what we actually know that we're going to use. If we wanted to rename the column headings, we could do that as well. But for right now, I'll just switch into the report mode. So if I click the report tab that's over there, then it will actually take that data that it pulled in from that website, and now it's actually building that Power Pivot model in the background and, you know, pulling all the data together to make it so that it's actually usable. And so what you'll notice over here, might be a little hard to see, is that it took the name, which unfortunately has this 13 after it, that just came over from the page itself. I could have renamed to remove that. But then you'll notice these sigma symbols here for those of you who have used like any kind of cube access within Excel, or you've used any of the other kind of cube browsers. Will recognize those as being something where it's tagging what the actual measures are that are within your data. So it's actually detecting anything that's numeric basically as a measure. It's not something that I told it to do. It's just, like I said, the whole idea of the 3 clicks to insight type scenario that they're trying to use with this. It's making a lot of assumptions based on that. So if you know that you've got data in whatever table you're pulling from that you don't want it to create a measure based on, you probably want to change its type from numeric to some kind of text, and then it won't convert that into a measure automatically. So that's just something to keep in mind. But if we click on title, it's going to by default pick the first measure as something that I want to see it by. That's not very interesting to do it by ranks, so what I'd actually prefer to do is see title by worldwide gross. So then we can actually see the actual dollar amounts for each of the different movies. This is in alphabetical order by the movie title, of course. You can always change all the sorting and all that kind of stuff when you're within the table. You can change the graph type if you want to change it to something a little bit different. But the idea is that you are building these reports that can be one or more of these different charts. So I've clicked outside of this, so normally it's highlighted. If I click outside of it and select something again, so say this time I want to see worldwide gross by year. I'm not sure why it put it on top. It shouldn't have done that. It should have been smart enough to actually put it below, but sometimes, like I said, it's all beta. Things happen. So it did create a second chart now. Now this chart isn't very useful in the way that it did it because, like I said, it assumes year as a measure. I really want year to be something I do in the axis, so I'm going to have to manually drag year into the axis. So then we can kind of see what are the worldwide grosses by year, seeing that 2012 was the biggest, which I think was the year Avatar came out, if I remember, so that's probably why that one's so high. The other thing I know people are going to be asking for right away, can I change this color scheme? No. As of right now, you cannot change this color scheme. That is one of the limitations that some people don't like right now, is that you are very limited in what you can and can't do within the actual reporting tools, but I'm sure that'll change over time. They'll probably add the capability to come in and do some other updates to it. But for right now, you're kind of limited to what's built into the tool. Like I said, you've got all these different kinds of charts. We change this to a line chart. We can see how, well, of course, they decline because it sorted it by the order of the amount there. That's why that one went that way like that. But just gives you an idea of how the different chart types might work. And then you can create multiple pages. So the idea with these reports is if you want a whole bunch of different analytics on different pages, you can do that too. So you build out all these pages with a whole bunch of different stuff using one or a combination of a whole bunch of different data sources to actually pull this data in. Like say if I wanted to pull in maybe the worldwide weather or something like that for each of these years to kind of see how weather might affect, how these grosses of the movies were occurring over time. You do all that kind of mashup type stuff that you're used to. So that's kind of cool how they've got that set up. Then the other thing that's actually fairly recent is they did add these two buttons up here for new measure and new column. So that's a feature that's existed in Power Pivot, of course, from the very beginning, is that you could actually add your own calculated measures to actually do like profit or something like that if you needed to, or even add a new column into your data source where, say, you had first and last name that came from whatever source you had. You could add a new column, write the DAX to actually merge that into a full name type column. All that kind of stuff now is built into this within the Power BI Designer now as well. So like I said, they're adding features all the time. They've been adding new chart types. They've got gauges now, and they've got maps, which was something that they didn't have early on with the setup of the preview when it first came out. So it is increasing over time with the capabilities that they're adding in. And like I said, there's the Manage Relationships button isn't working here, but if I had multiple data sources, you'd actually be able to click that to then create where are your joins to the different data sources so that it can actually figure out how to navigate the model properly. But right now we'll switch gears. So what I'll do is I'll save this to a save as. And like I said, this is going to be that new PBIX file. So we'll just call this 24HOP. Save that out to my desktop. So now I'm completely closed down Power BI Designer, and I'll switch over to the web version. So if you go to, once you get everything set up on that powerbi.com site with your login, you can then go to the preview.powerbi.com website and log in with any kind of live ID. Usually it'd have to be the one that was associated with the work email address that you used to sign in with. But I know there's probably ways to get around that if you wanted to, and that's how you get to the new place where they want you to actually be deploying these solutions. So right now the way you can deploy these things, as you'll see on the left, is it kind of goes into a dashboard view by default, and then you've got the reports, which is what you just saw me building before, and then the actual data set. So you can see I've got a few other data sets that I didn't have on the other one, some other reports as well, and then a couple dashboards. So the thing to keep in mind with this new setup of Power BI is that dashboards can be a universal thing that can span multiple reports and over multiple data sets. The idea with a dashboard is that you're pulling in a whole bunch of these little analytics graphs. Sometimes it's just these cards that have a number on them that get updated over time. That's the kind of idea behind a dashboard, and those are pulled from all of the different reports that you have deployed. So once you have a set of reports deployed out to your site, you click on those reports, the specific pieces of it, and click this little pin, and that pins it to whatever dashboard you were last on. So let's create a new dashboard. So I'll go 20, if I could type 24 hop. So it's a blank dashboard right now. I'll come over here to this Google Analytics report again, select one of these analytics, click the dashboard, the pin sign, to get a little message up there on the right saying it has been pinned. If we switch back, we can actually now see that particular one, but then I can go to a completely different report, go to the retail analytics. I'll click this little pie chart. Maybe I want to see that for some reason, so I'll pin that. So now if we go back to here, there's that particular thing. So these are from two completely different report sets, as you can see. And then the nice thing is if you click on that analytic, it takes you back to the source. So if wherever you pinned it from actually then goes here. But the other thing you can do is you actually can edit these. Oops, I clicked it. I shouldn't have clicked it. Go back. So there's a little edit thing when you've pinned something to the dashboard where you can actually then change that analytic on the dashboard to a certain thing and add some title and stuff like that. But the other thing you can do when you go back to the is you could actually modify this yourself, assuming you have the appropriate rights. You could actually come in and change this now to some other kind of chart or something like that, and then actually create a whole bunch of new ones that you could pin to this particular dashboard as well. And then you can actually remove them. It's easy enough to get rid of them. You can share out the dashboards, etc. And then you can also even you can add data sets and dashboards, as you'll notice, but as of right now you can't add reports. So they have not built the report editor into the web interface. I don't know if that's coming. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that they're going to add that into here too. But you can go into the data sets and add any kind of data. There's some cool new options. This is what I was referring to with the data warehouse. If you click the big data, there's now this new option for the Azure SQL Warehouse. They just added that actually yesterday or today. So that shows you how often they're updating. They're just kind of updating stuff all the time. Or you can click, like I was in the other one, this is a little bit more graphical, where you can click the SAS options, and you can see there's a lot more new options, including Visual Studio Online, which is kind of cool. And then you actually get into stuff like QuickBooks Online as well now that are available as SaaS services. But you got a whole bunch of different ones. That retail analysis sample that you saw in my setup, when you go into your Power BI preview site, that will be auto-loaded for you into that space. So that's why I have that one there as well, is that that gets auto-created for you when you create your account. It's got some cool mixes of all the different types of analytics that you can get into, where you can actually interact with them once you go to the report and actually play around with some of these maps to actually zoom in and out and come over here into these, and you can double click on stuff to drill down. All those kind of interactivity items are built into this right from the start. And you can, so I guess there's a light editor. You can click that edit report button, so I didn't want to give you the option. You couldn't like edit. You can come in here and do quite a bit of changes to it. There are just some options I found that haven't fully been baked in to the online version, and it's, depending on your computer, a little bit slow or hard to use. The nice thing is they are not using a Silverlight in any of this, so it's all HTML 5.0. And set up with some of the newer technologies, so it is a lot more cross-compatible in there. You just
Hey,
can't
Steve,
create new reports. Yeah.
just a quick reminder, we're now 15 minutes, so if you want to
Yep.
start wrapping up, leave a little time for questions.
Yes, I will. That was the end of the demo. It's just a couple more summary slides here. So some of the stuff that's coming for the future, as I kind of highlighted, they're changing stuff constantly between the designer and the service itself, which is the powerbi.com website. I'll get into a second with the free and pro versions, because I know that's always the next question, is what is licensing like? I mentioned the HTML5, cross-platform, cross-browser support, Active Directory security integration is built in. Some of the other stuff, then these open points are things that I'm not sure about what are coming. I'm sure there'll be more SAS connectors. They keep adding them, at least 2 or 3 every month. What are they going to do with the Excel and SharePoint stuff that exists today? That's kind of up in the air. Nobody really knows at this point. And then what's coming with SQL 2016. Again, these guys are kind of working on a different schedule. They're not following the SQL Server release schedule, so we probably won't see anything necessarily tied to that specifically. And then, of course, integration of Power Map. That really, we don't know where that's going. They've added the mapping capabilities that are built into Power View today, but not the Power Map capabilities, which those of you who've used that's kind of where you can do the movies zooming in and out on a globe and doing all kinds of interactive stuff with maps that's a little bit more than just a static map. So here is that pricing chart. This is probably by far one of the better ones you've ever seen from Microsoft as far as pricing models. There are 2. There is free and there is pro. Free includes a certain limits, as you might expect, and then pro is where you get the higher capabilities. Biggest one people are always bringing up is the scheduled data refresh. You're only allowed to do it daily with the free, whereas you can do it up to hourly on the pro. So there's a big benefit there. And then the pro is only going to cost $9.99 per user per month. So you would probably only have to give pro out to the higher end people who are going to use it a lot more, and then everybody else could just use the free. And the designer is free as well, so the designer works with free as well as pro. There's no difference in the designer between the 2 layers. All right, so that's all I got, so I guess we'll go into questions.
Yes, so except for everybody losing connectivity, obviously, which
Right.
is kind of most of the questions. Okay, we can see that. Well, we do have a couple of questions, so let me just get there.
Okay, and I kind of flew through it also.
Yeah. When you mentioned Amazon, do you mean AWS? This is by Angela.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was referring to, was the ability to connect to AWS. But like I said, you could use the existing stuff with like an HTTP connection, I think, to a certain extent, or even the I keep thinking OLADB. What's the new setup now? It's not OLADB. It's the brain just went completely blank. But yeah, the standard ways of connecting to data exist for those AWS sources already. I just wouldn't be surprised if they add something that's a little bit more of a tailored specifically to AWS, was kind of what I was thinking about.
Awesome. So Andrea had a question, but I believe it was answered in your session a little bit later. Dinesh has a question. You did mention Power BI has a connector to SSAS cubes.
Mm-hmm.
When we reference an SSAS cube, will it still create a Power Pivot model behind the scenes, or will it use MDX to query the data?
Well, I think it's going to depend on how you decide to query that data is going to be probably what defines how it does that. So if you're going to access it As a multi-dimensional cube, of course, it's going to probably, and all this changed with 2014 as well, because they made it where basically the multi-dimensional cubes could understand the DAX programming language, and they made it so that the tabular could understand the MDX, or not really understand it, but they go through a translation layer. So as far as what it does in the background, it's really going to depend on how you're writing those queries to actually go against it. I think if everything in the end that gets pulled into the solution when you're designing the report goes into a tabular type model. I mean, it's just like Power Query is today in Excel. If you connect it to an analysis services cube, no matter what you do as far as whether that's multidimensional or tabular on the back end, it's actually going to pull it into its own model, because that's the only way it's going to be able to do the other references you might want to bring in from a web data source or another Excel spreadsheet. It has to have its own internal model that it understands. So I think no matter what you do, it's probably always going to have that tabular model in the background, just as to whether when you do the refresh on it, that's when the stuff's going to change. It goes back to the source, pulls in new stuff to update that model within the Power BI designer, is kind of how it's all going to work.
Awesome.
That's my thinking, at least.
Leslie asks, do we have to deploy to the preview site, or is there a way to deploy it on a corporate site?
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the things I was highlighting, tried to a little bit there at the beginning. Right now, with the way the preview is structured today, and I stress the today because it changes all the time, like I said, you can only deploy out to the actual preview.powerbi.com website. But the other thing I tried to highlight is that if you don't want to put your stuff out on the web, that PBIX file can just be sent around, put on SharePoint, into a document library, etc. And then everybody who has access to the Power BI Designer application can then open that PBIX file. So as of right now, if you want it shared easily on the web, it's only preview.powerbi.com, but since it is a self-contained file, you can pass that file around. It just means that everybody's going to have to use Power BI Designer then to access the information. They won't be able to use the website at all.
Awesome. I think that also answers Varsham's question, which is on similar lines.
Okay.
Randy asks, when will we have the official Power BI?
I wish I knew. If I had a crystal ball, I would be able to make a lot of money. But my guessing is, since it's been 6 months now, they're going to probably just go into a full release. I wouldn't be surprised if they time it around SQL Server 2016 coming out. It's a good possibility. I think that might be the timing they're looking for. But like I said, these guys kind of operate on their own schedule to a certain extent. They're not really dependent on anything in SQL Server 2016, so there's no reason they would have to wait. So all you can do is keep your eyes on, they do have a blog on the Power BI. I just can't remember. I think it's on one of the MSDN blogs, but there's a Power BI blog out there that you can follow as well. And they always are announcing when the new releases come out and what the new features are, so I'm sure they'll make a big splash about it there when it does go live for real.
Awesome. Thank you. Hold on, I just lost it. Okay, Chris asks, the graph with the years at the bottom, can you sort by the year?
Yeah, you can always change all the sorting. I just didn't have time to go in and actually show you how to do that. But yeah, you can change all the sorting. You can do filtering. That's the other thing I didn't show, is that you can actually go into the individual data components and say you don't care to see year 2002. You could actually unselect it. It kind of works just like how if you've used any of the pivot tables or anything within Excel, it all works almost exactly the same as that. It looks very similar as you start drilling into it.
Nice. So Cynthia asked, when can we get the recording of the webinar? This will be available in about a week on the 24 Hours of Past website.
Hopefully they'll be able to edit it together or something.
Yeah, splice it on the table. Jeremy asks, what's the difference between the Power Tool add-ins in Excel and Designer?
So that's kind of the distinction I've been trying to figure out myself. I mean, right now I think of the add-ins and the Office 365 piece and the SharePoint pieces that are out there today as that's Power BI 1.0, and then Power BI 2.0 is the stuff like I was showing with the Designer where it's all, you know, built into one tool, and then you have the preview.powerbi.com. Those are really the only two components of the new 2.0 setup. Whether they will move the stuff from 2.0 back into the old add-ins, they haven't said yet what they're going to do with that. I think the first test for that will be when Excel 2016 comes out. They've already said that with Excel 2016 they will still have Power Pivot, Power View, and now they're adding Power Map as installed by default add-ins in Excel because they did Power View and Power Pivot with, Power Queries in there too. So yeah, it's Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View and Power Map will all be built into 2016, whereas Power Map was not with 2014 or whatever our last version of Office was. They change them so often. So they're adding those add-ins in to make them default, so I'm guessing they're still going to have some of the 2.0 features built into them. Whether they interface completely with the new PowerBI.com website, I don't know. I mean, that's all a guess at this point as to what their plan is for those existing add-ins. It may just be that they just completely leave all that stuff behind. They have not said publicly what they're doing with the Excel add-ins at this point.
Okay, thank you for that. Sambath Raj asks, if we create an SSAS Cube connection, how do we delete the data source from Power BI or make it invisible to certain users? So it's a security question.
Right. So it's if you're using the preview version of the connector that's out now, it authenticates using whatever web credential, or not web, Windows credentials you're using to secure that cube. So if if you've built a report that you're merging multiple data sets together, one of them being one of these cubes that you've got secured, if that person tries to access the cube and they don't have access, they won't see that data. So what that does to your report would probably require some testing if you're doing some merging of data together, whether it will show anything on the report or just show the data from the other pieces. Is going to depend a lot on how you set up your data sources and all the connections between them in those reports. But from my understanding, the way everything is set up is it completely reads in the Windows credentials and passes those through to the cube just as it would today with anything else. So that's how they say it's going to work. Now, how that works with the model in the background, that's kind of the part that I haven't had a chance to really test yet.
Okay. Another question from Cameron. Do you know which versions of business object universes can be accessed?
That's a good question. I do not know that off the top of my head, and I don't know if they have publicly said what versions that accesses or not. That'd be something I probably would have to, I'll check into that actually.
Okay.
I'll put up a blog post probably once the link to the video goes live anyway. My blog is just blog.wakebi.com, so I'll make sure to look into that, and I'm sure there'll be other questions that we may not even get to that I'll make sure to answer there as well.
Okay, so I think we're just about out of time, and we do have 2 more slides, so if you can move forward. So I would like to thank Steve very much for his time and expertise and this enlightening session. I'd also like to thank our sponsors again, Microsoft, Cisco, Dell, SQL Sentry, and HP, and SolarWinds. I hope you enjoyed this session, and if you're up to it, coming up is a session on trend analysis of SQL error logs, seeing beyond the error with Paul Young, which is going to start in a few minutes. So thank you very much again. You have 2 minutes to go to the bathroom and catch the next session. So thank you very much, and thank you again, Steve. It's been a pleasure, and hope to see you soon.
Yep. Thank you all.
Ta-ta.